The message came on a cold morning in December. Every screen on Earth, every radio, every communication device suddenly stopped working. Then a voice spoke. It was not human. It was cold and sharp like metal scraping against stone. Admiral Park was drinking his morning coffee when his tablet flickered to life. He was 62 years old, a man who had served in 3 wars and seen things that gave him nightmares, but nothing had prepared him for this. The voice spoke in perfect Korean, then English, then every language known to humanity. Attention, species designation, human. You have been observed, you have been measured. You have been found acceptable for integration into the Galactic Council. As is tradition, you will now pay tribute. 30% of all planetary resources, 50,000 laborers each year. This is not negotiable. Compliance is expected within one standard galactic cycle. Failure to comply will result in immediate subjugation. The message repeated 3 times, then every screen went dark. Park set down his coffee cup. His hands were not shaking. He had learned long ago to control his fear, but inside his heart was beating fast. He picked up his secure phone and called the president. President was already awake. She had not slept well in weeks. Running a planet was hard work, and she often wondered why she had wanted this job. Now, staring at the blank screen in her office, she understood that everything she had worried about before was meaningless. This was the real test. "Admiral Park," she said when she answered, "I assume you received the same message." "Yes, Madam President, the entire world did." "What do we know about these visitors?" "Nothing yet, but I have my best people working on it." Commander Lee was one of those best people. She was 45 years old, sharp as a knife, and she had spent her entire career studying the stars. For 20 years she had searched for signs of alien life. Now she had found it, and she wished she had not. She stood in the intelligence center, surrounded by screens showing panic spreading across the globe, riots in some cities, prayer gatherings in others. Some people were celebrating, believing the aliens would bring peace and technology. Knew better. She had studied history. When a powerful group met a weaker one and demanded tribute, it never ended well for the weak. Her assistant walked up beside her. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened. "I have been analyzing the transmission," he said. "It came from somewhere beyond Neptune, and there is more. I found old signals buried in our historical data. They have been watching us for at least 200 years. Felt a chill run down her spine. 200 years. They watched us fight 2 world wars. They watched us nearly destroy ourselves with nuclear weapons, and they did nothing. They were waiting, waiting until we were worth taking." The United Earth Assembly met 3 days later. Representatives from every nation sat in a great hall, their faces pale with fear and confusion. Some wanted to surrender immediately. They argued that humanity could not fight against a civilization that had traveled between stars. Others wanted to fight, even if it meant death. They would rather die free than live as slaves. President stood at the podium. She was a small woman, but her presence filled the room. She had grown up poor in a small village, worked her way through school, and climbed to the highest position on Earth through sheer determination. She had never backed down from a fight in her life. "I have listened to all of your arguments," she said. "Some of you say we should surrender, you say we have no choice, you say resistance is foolish." She paused and looked around the room. "But I ask you this, what kind of life would we have under their rule? They want our resources, they want our people as laborers. What does that mean? It means slavery. It means watching our children taken away to work in alien mines. It means giving up everything that makes us human." The room was silent. "Others say we should fight and die. I do not want that either. I do not want our species to end. But I believe there is a third option. We fight and we survive. We show these aliens that humans are not easy prey. We make them pay for every inch they try to take." Admiral Park spoke next. He had been a soldier for 40 years, and he had never asked his troops to do anything he would not do himself. "We have 47 warships," he said. They are old, they are slow, but they are crewed by the finest men and women I have ever served with. We do not know what we face, but I know this, we will not go quietly. The vote was held that night. It was close. Many still wanted to surrender, but in the end the decision was made. Humanity would resist. The response was transmitted into space the next morning. It was short, 3 words that would change the galaxy forever. We will not yield. Commander Lee watched the transmission leave Earth's communication array. Beside her was already working on plans, strategies, anything that might give them a chance. "Do you think they expected this?" asked. Shook his head. "No. According to my research, no species has ever refused the council. Every civilization either paid tribute or was destroyed. Then we will be the first to refuse and survive." Looked at her. There was something like hope in his eyes, but also fear. That is a very optimistic view. It is the only view I can afford to have. Across the world, people prepared. Factories that had been making cars now made weapons. Scientists who had been studying climate change now studied alien technology. Soldiers who had been fighting each other now trained together. For the first time in history, humanity was truly united. Park stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UES Defiance. His first officer, Sora, stood beside him. She was young, only 35, but she had a mind for battle that reminded him of himself when he was her age. "They will come," Park said, staring out at the stars. "And when they do, we will be ready." Sora nodded. "Yes, Admiral, we will be ready." 6 months passed. Humanity built, humanity trained, humanity waited. And then, on a quiet Tuesday morning, the sensors detected them. 300 ships, emerging from the darkness of space like a swarm of angry insects. The Council had come to collect their tribute. But humanity had a different answer waiting for them. The alien ships were beautiful in a terrible way. They were long and curved like the bones of some great sea creature, and their hulls glowed with a soft blue light that made them look almost peaceful. But Admiral Park knew better. These ships had destroyed entire civilizations. They had burned worlds to ash and taken millions of people as slaves. And now they had come for Earth. Park stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the enemy fleet on his tactical display. 300 ships against his 47. The numbers were not good, but numbers were not everything. "Admiral," said Sora, his first officer, "the commander is hailing us." There were the soldiers of the Galactic Council. They were tall reptilian creatures with scales the color of dried blood and eyes like yellow fire. For 3,000 years, they had crushed every species that dared to resist. They had never lost a battle. "Put him through," Park said. The screen flickered and a face appeared. It was ugly by human standards, all sharp teeth and flat nostrils and those terrible burning eyes. When it spoke, its voice was like rocks grinding together. "Human Commander, I am Fleet Master. You have been given a chance to submit peacefully. Your leaders refused. This was foolish. I give you one final opportunity. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick. Resist, and I will make your species suffer for 1,000 years." Park looked at the alien face on his screen. He thought about his wife, who had died 10 years ago from cancer. He thought about his daughter, who was now a doctor on Mars. He thought about the billions of people on Earth who were counting on him. "Fleet Master," he said calmly, "I have a message for your council. We are not your cattle. We are not your slaves, and we do not surrender." He cut the transmission. Sora looked at him with wide eyes. "Admiral, that was necessary," Park finished. "Now let us show them what humans can do." The battle began in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. This was not an accident. Park had chosen this location carefully. He had studied every report, every piece of data about the. He knew they liked open space where their superior numbers could surround their enemies, so he gave them the opposite. The asteroids here were massive, some as big as small moons. Human ships had mined them for 200 years. Every rock had been mapped. Every tunnel had been explored. And in the past 6 months, explosives had been hidden in thousands of them. Captain led the first attack squadron. She was 38 years old and had been flying since she was 16. There was no one in the fleet who could match her skills. "All fighters follow my lead," she said through her radio. "Stay close to the rocks, use them as cover, and remember these bastards have never fought anyone like us." Her squadron of 20 small fighters dove into the asteroid field. The ships followed, confident in their superior firepower. They did not understand why these tiny human ships were flying into such dangerous terrain. Surely it was suicide. It was not suicide, it was a trap. Weaved between asteroids at speeds that should have been impossible, her pilots followed, trusting her completely. The ships, larger and slower, struggled to keep up. They crashed into rocks. They collided with each other. And then the explosives began to detonate. Lieutenant pressed the first trigger. He was 25 years old, fresh out of the academy, and he was terrified. But he did his job. The asteroid beside him exploded, sending a wall of debris into the formation. More explosions followed. Asteroids became weapons. The ships, designed for open combat, were torn apart by rocks and shrapnel. In the first hour of battle, 80 enemy ships were destroyed. On the Defiance, Park watched the destruction with grim satisfaction. But he knew this was only the beginning. The Still had over 200 ships, and they were learning. They pulled back from the asteroid field and began bombarding it from a distance, trying to clear a path. "They are adapting," Sora observed. "Then so will we," signaled Captain Ryu. "It is time for Phase 2. Captain Ryu commanded the carrier Horizon's Edge. She was 42 years old and had a scar across her left cheek from an accident when she was young. Her pilots loved her because she never asked them to do anything she would not do herself. "Launch all bombers," she ordered. "Target their largest ships, make them bleed." The bombers were new, designed in the past 6 months specifically for this fight. They were fast and they carried weapons based on reverse-engineered alien technology. Dr. Han, who had studied the fragments of alien ships found on Earth over the years, had helped design them. She had worked for months without sleep, driven by the knowledge that failure meant extinction. The bombers struck the fleet like angry wasps. They targeted engines, weapons systems, communication arrays. They did not try to destroy the big ships directly. They just hurt them, crippled them, made them useless. Fleet Master watched his fleet falling apart with growing rage. This was impossible. The humans were primitives. They had only been in space for 300 years. How could they fight like this? He ordered a full retreat. It was the first time in history that a fleet had retreated from a battle with a younger species. On Earth, people watched the battle through long-range sensors. When the alien ships began to flee, the cheering could be heard around the world. In Seoul, in New York, in Lagos, in Mumbai, people danced in the streets and wept with joy. But President did not celebrate. She sat in her office with Commander Lee and watched the reports with worried eyes. "We won today," said. "This is good news." "It is," agreed. "But what happens tomorrow? We surprised them. We hurt them. But the Council has thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, technology we cannot even imagine. They will come back, and next time they will be prepared." "Then we prepare too." Nodded slowly. "Yes, we prepare, we build, and we find allies." She looked at. "They are not the only species in this galaxy. There must be others who hate the Council, others who want to be free." "I will find them," promised. "I will search every signal, every transmission. If there are friends out there, I will find them." Admiral Park returned to Earth as a hero, but he refused the parades and the medals. He went straight back to work, training his crews, repairing his ships, preparing for the next battle. Sora found him alone on the bridge of the Defiance late one night, staring at the stars. "You should rest, Admiral," she said. "I will rest when this is over." He turned to look at her. We won a battle today, Sara, but the war has just begun, and I have a feeling it will be the longest, hardest war humanity has ever fought. Sara stood beside him and looked at the stars too. Then we will fight it together. Yes, Park said quietly, together, that is the human way. Somewhere in the darkness of space, they were already planning their revenge. And the Galactic Council was learning a new emotion, one they had not felt in 3,000 years. Fear. The Galactic Council had not held an emergency meeting in 3,000 years. There had been no need. Their power was absolute. Their word was law. Every species in the galaxy either obeyed or was destroyed. It was simple. It was efficient. It had worked perfectly until now. The council chamber was a massive dome floating in space, connected to the Nexus station by long tubes of metal and glass. Inside, representatives from 17 species sat in a great circle, their bodies ranging from the massive rock-like to the delicate, almost transparent. At the center stood the High Speaker, a towering creature named. Its body was covered in black armor that clicked and rattled when it moved. Its many eyes glowed with cold intelligence. The humans have refused tribute, announced, its voice echoing through the chamber. They have destroyed 87 ships and damaged 112 more. The fleet master has returned in disgrace. A ripple of shock passed through the assembly. They were supposed to be unbeatable. They had crushed rebellions on hundreds of worlds. They had burned entire civilizations to ash. How could these primitive humans have hurt them so badly? The representative, an old warrior named General, rose to speak. His voice was thick with shame and anger. The humans fight without honor. They hide behind rocks. They use tricks and traps. They do not face us in open battle like proper warriors. And yet they won, said Ambassador Shin. Every eye in the chamber turned to the human. He was small compared to most of the aliens around him, just a thin man in a simple black suit. But he stood straight and spoke clearly, showing no fear. Ambassador Shin had been chosen for this mission because he was the best diplomat humanity had. He had spent 30 years negotiating treaties, ending conflicts, and finding common ground between enemies. But he had not come here to negotiate. He had come here to deliver a message. You call us primitive, Shin continued, his voice calm and steady. You call us young and weak. You look at our small ships and our short history and you think we are nothing, but you are wrong. Made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. You are a species that has barely learned to leave its own planet. You have existed for less than a moment in cosmic time. What could you possibly know that we do not? We know how to fight, Shin said. Not because we want to, but because we have had to. Our history is written in blood. We have fought each other for thousands of years over land, over resources, over ideas. We have invented weapons that could destroy our own world. We have looked into the abyss of extinction and pulled ourselves back. That is who we are. We are survivors. The chamber was silent. No one had ever spoken to the council like this. You have conquered hundreds of species, Shin continued. But those species had known only peace before you came. They did not know war. They did not know resistance. They submitted because they did not know how to fight. He paused and looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every alien present. We do. Back on Earth, preparations continued at a desperate pace. General oversaw the construction of new defense platforms around Mars and the Moon. She was 50 years old, a veteran of 3 conflicts, and she had never worked harder in her life. Her crews worked in shifts around the clock, sleeping in their suits, eating their meals while welding metal plates together. We need more time, she told President during a late-night call. Another 6 months, maybe a year, then we would have real defenses. We do not have a year, replied. Our intelligence says the Council is already planning their next attack. Then we work faster. In a secret laboratory beneath the mountains of Korea, Engineer Bay was having a breakthrough. He was 33 years old, a genius who had graduated from university at 16, and he had been studying the fragments of technology captured during the first battle. The alien shields were incredible, able to absorb weapons fire that should have torn ships apart. Human shields were weak by comparison. But had found something, a pattern in the alien energy signatures, a weakness. "Look at this," he said to his assistant. Oh, she was 28, brilliant in her own right, and she had been working beside him for weeks without rest. "I see it," she whispered, her eyes widening. "The shields cycle every 3 seconds. If we time our weapons to hit during the cycle, we can get through, finished. We can actually hurt them." They worked through the night, building a prototype weapon that could exploit the weakness. By morning, they had something that might change the war. Commander Lee had a different mission. She had been searching the galaxy for allies, anyone who might be willing to stand with humanity against the Council. For weeks, she had found nothing. Every species she contacted was either too afraid or too loyal to the Council. Then she found the signal. It was old and weak, hidden beneath layers of interference. But it was there. A message, repeating over and over in a language that took her team days to translate. "We remember freedom. We wait for the day when we can fight again. If you can hear this, you are not alone." The message came from a species called the. According to Council records, they had been conquered 800 years ago and integrated into the tribute system. But apparently, some of them had not forgotten what freedom meant. "Can we contact them?" asked her team. "It is risky," replied. "If the Council intercepts our transmission, they will know we are looking for allies. They might punish the. And if we do not contact them, we fight alone," made her decision. "Send the message. Tell them humanity stands ready to fight. Tell them they are not alone either." Ambassador Shin continued his speech to the Council. He knew that every word he spoke was being recorded, transmitted across the galaxy. This was not just a message to the Council. It was a message to every species living under their rule. "You have built an empire on fear," he said. "You have taken children from their parents and forced them to work in your mines. You have stripped worlds of their resources and left them barren. You have crushed every spark of resistance for 3,000 years. He took a breath. But empires built on fear always fall. Always. Because one day someone refuses to be afraid. One day someone stands up and says no more." His eyes glowed brighter with anger. "You threaten us, human." "No, I make you a promise. We will not stop fighting. We will not surrender. And we will not be alone. Every species you have conquered, every world you have enslaved, will hear about what we have done. They will learn that the Council can be beaten, and some of them will remember what it means to be free." The Council chamber erupted in chaos. Aliens shouted and argued. Some demanded that Earth be destroyed immediately. Others warned that the humans might be right, that rebellion could spread if they were not careful. Shin stood in the center of the storm, calm and patient. He had delivered his message. Now it was time to go home and prepare for what came next. As his shuttle left the Nexus station, he looked back at the massive structure floating in space. It looked so powerful, so permanent, but he knew that nothing lasted forever. The storm was gathering, and humanity would be ready when it broke. 700 ships emerged from fold space near Saturn's largest moon, Titan. They were not just this time. The Council had sent their greatest force, the Imperium fleet. There were ancient beings, older than most species in the galaxy. Their bodies were made of living stone, slow and patient and nearly impossible to kill. Their ships were fortresses of metal and rock, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. In 10,000 years of warfare, they had never lost a battle. Admiral Park studied the enemy fleet on his display. His face was calm, but his heart was heavy. Earth's fleet had grown to 73 ships after months of frantic building. 73 against 700. The math was brutal. "Admiral," Sora said quietly, "their commander is hailing us." Park nodded. "Let me see him." The screen showed a face, if it could be called a face. It was a mass of gray rock with two glowing blue eyes and a mouth that looked like a crack in a mountain. When it spoke, its voice rumbled like an earthquake. I am Supreme Overseer. I have destroyed 47 civilizations. I have burned 300 worlds. I have never failed. The rocky face shifted slightly, almost smiling. Surrender now, human, and I will grant your species a quick death. Resist, and I will make your suffering last for generations. Park thought about his daughter on Mars. He thought about the billions of people on Earth, watching this moment, hopping for a miracle. He thought about every human who had ever lived, every war they had fought, every time they had been told they could not win. Overseer, he said slowly, I have a message for you. Speak. Come and take us. He cut the transmission. The Battle of Titan began at 700 hours Earth time. It would last for 16 hours. It would become the most famous battle in human history. Captain Ryu commanded the carrier Horizon's Edge from the center of the human formation. She had not slept in 2 days, but her mind was sharp and her voice was steady. All squadrons launch. Remember your training, trust and make every shot count. Captain led her fighters into the chaos. She was older now than when the war started, and she had lost friends, good pilots who had died fighting for Earth. But she was still the best pilot in the fleet, and she intended to prove it today. Stay with me, she told her squadron. We are going for their command ships. Hit the engines, the weapons, anything that hurts, and do not die. That is an order. Lieutenant flew on her wing. He was not so young anymore. The war had aged him, but he had become a skilled pilot, one of the best in the fleet. Understood, Captain. No dying today. The first wave of ships met the human fighters near Titan's orbit. The weapons were powerful, designed to destroy enemy ships with single shots. But the human fighters were small and fast, dancing between the massive enemy vessels like flies around giants. Targeted a cruiser's engine section. She fired her new weapons, the ones designed by Engineer Bay with the timing mechanism that could penetrate alien shields. The shots hit perfectly. The engine exploded, sending the cruiser spinning into another ship. It works, she breathed. The new weapons actually work. Across the fleet, human ships began using the same weapons. Shields, thought to be unbreakable, failed one after another. Ships that should have been invincible were suddenly vulnerable. On the command ship, Supreme Overseer watched his fleet taking damage with growing disbelief. This was impossible. The humans were insects. They should have been crushed in minutes. Increase power to all weapons, he ordered. Destroy them all. But the humans refused to be destroyed. They fought with a fury that they had never seen. Every ship that fell was replaced by another. Every pilot who died was avenged by theirs. They were outnumbered 10-1, but they fought like they were the majority. Admiral Park commanded from the bridge of the Defiance, directing his fleet with the skill of a master chess player. He moved ships like pieces on a board, creating traps, exploiting weaknesses, always staying one step ahead of the enemy. Concentrate fire on Sector 7, he ordered. Captain, swing your squadron around and hit them from behind. Captain Ryu, launch your reserve bombers now. Sora watched him with awe. She had served with many commanders, but she had never seen anyone like Park. He was reading the battle, predicting enemy movements before they happened. It was like he could see the future. The battle turned in hour 12. They had lost over 200 ships. Their formation was breaking apart. And then something happened that had never occurred in 10,000 years of warfare. Supreme Overseer ordered a retreat. Pull back, his voice rumbled across the fleet. All ships pull back to fold space coordinates. On the Defiance, Sora stared at her display in disbelief. They are running. They are actually running. Park nodded slowly. He felt no joy, only exhaustion. Signal the fleet, do not pursue, we have won enough for today. The human losses were heavy, 23 ships destroyed, over 4,000 soldiers dead, but they had done the impossible. They had beaten the Imperium fleet. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. People gathered in streets, in homes, in churches and temples and mosques. They hugged each other and cried and laughed. For the first time since the war began, they truly believed they could win. But President knew the truth. She sat in her office with her advisors, her face showing the weight of leadership. "This is not over," she said. "The Council will send everything they have now. They cannot afford to lose. If we win, every subjugated species in the galaxy will rise up against them." General nodded grimly. "Our intelligence says they are gathering a combined fleet, every species in the Council, every ship they can find." "How many?" "Over 4,000. Silence fell over the room. 4,000 ships. Even with their new weapons, humanity could not win against such a force, not by fighting alone. Commander Lee spoke up. "We may not have to fight alone." She pulled up a display showing a map of the galaxy. Dozens of points were highlighted. "I have been in contact with resistance groups across Council space. The species that were conquered centuries ago but never stopped dreaming of freedom. They are ready to rise up." "What do they need?" asked. "A signal, proof that the Council can be beaten, and weapons." Paused. "If we can get them the new shield-penetrating technology, they can fight back against their occupiers." Looked around the room. Her advisors were tired, scared, uncertain, but they were still here. They were still fighting. "Then that is what we will do," she said. "We will not wait for the Council to come to us. We will take the fight to them. We will show the galaxy that freedom is worth fighting for." Admiral Park stood alone on his bridge that night, looking at the stars. He was 63 now, old and tired and carrying the weight of billions of lives on his shoulders. But he was not finished yet. "We are coming for you," he whispered to the darkness, "and we will not stop until every chain is broken." Somewhere in the galaxy, the Council was gathering its forces for the final battle. They thought they knew what they were facing. They were wrong. The human fleet jumped into Council space on the anniversary of the first transmission. 1 year ago, they had received a message demanding their surrender. Today, they had come to deliver their answer in person. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the Nexus station grow larger on his screen. It was enormous, the size of a small moon, covered with towers and domes and weapons platforms. Around it floated over 4,000 warships from every species in the Council, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Against them, humanity had brought 112 ships. "Admiral," Sora said quietly, "they are hailing us, every channel. They want to know why we are here." Park almost smiled. "Tell them we came to accept their surrender." The battle that followed would be remembered for 10,000 years. Historians would write books about it. Children would learn about it in school. Songs would be sung about the humans who dared to challenge an empire. It began with a single transmission. Ambassador Shin, broadcasting from a captured cruiser, hacked into the Nexus communication network. His voice reached every corner of Council space, every planet, every station, every slave camp. "This is a message to all species living under Council rule. For 3,000 years, you have been told that resistance is impossible. You have been told that the Council is eternal, that their power is absolute. Today, we prove that is a lie." On 17 worlds, resistance groups that had been waiting for this moment sprang into action. They attacked their overseers with weapons smuggled from Earth. They sabotaged the mining equipment that had extracted their planet's resources for centuries. They shut down the power grids that kept them enslaved. The Council's attention was suddenly split in 100 directions. Ships that should have been defending the Nexus were called away to put down rebellions. The perfect formation around the station began to break apart. "Now," Park ordered, "all ships attack." The human fleet dove into the chaos like wolves among sheep. They were still outnumbered, but the enemy was confused, distracted, fighting on multiple fronts. And the humans had something the Council did not. They were fighting for something worth dying for. Captain led her squadron straight at the flagship. She was 40 now, her hair showing gray, her eyes showing the weariness of too many battles. But her hands on the controls were still steady, her instincts still sharp. "Follow me," she told her pilots. "We are going to board that ship." Boarding actions were considered insane by galactic standards. Space battles were supposed to be fought at a distance, ship against ship. But humans had studied history. They knew that sometimes the only way to win was to get close and fight hand to hand. The assault shuttles slammed into the flagship's hull. Airlocks were blown. Marines in powered armor poured into the alien ship, weapons blazing. Sergeant led the first squad through the corridors, his rifle cutting down soldiers. "Push forward," he shouted. "We need to reach the engine core." The fighting was brutal. Humans died in the narrow corridors, their blood mixing on the metal floors. But the humans kept coming, wave after wave, refusing to retreat, refusing to surrender. In the engine room, found what he was looking for, the ship's main power core. He set the explosives carefully, knowing he might not have time to escape. "Charges set," he reported through his radio, "detonating in 60 seconds. "Sergeant, get out of there," ordered. "No time, Captain. Too many of them between me and the shuttles." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was calm. "Tell my family I died well. Tell them I died free." The flagship exploded in a ball of white fire. It crashed into 3 other ships, creating a chain reaction that tore a hole in the Council formation. Across the battle, similar scenes played out. Human boarding parties seized enemy ships and turned them against each other. Engineers like Bay worked frantically on captured vessels, hacking systems and disabling weapons. His assistant, O, died protecting him from an assault team, her final act buying him the seconds he needed to crash the Nexus station's defensive grid. "The shields are down," reported through tears. "The station is vulnerable." Admiral Park saw the opening. "All capital ships concentrate fire on the Nexus. This ends now." President's voice cut through the battle chatter. She had insisted on being here, on a command ship at the edge of the fight. Her advisors had begged her to stay on Earth, but she had refused. "This is President of United Earth speaking to the Galactic Council. You offered us a choice, tribute or destruction. We chose neither. We chose to fight. We chose to stand." Her voice hardened with 3,000 years of stolen freedom. "Your empire of fear ends today." The Nexus station's defenses crumbled under the human assault. Explosions ripped through its hull. Its weapons fell silent one by one. And inside, in the great chamber where the Council had ruled for, panic was spreading. High Speaker watched his empire dying around him. His many eyes blinked with confusion. This was not supposed to happen. The Council was eternal. The Council was invincible. "How?" he whispered, his voice no longer commanding. "How did they do this?" Ambassador Shin's voice answered him through the chamber's speakers. "You asked the wrong question, High Speaker. You should not ask how we did this. You should ask why." His voice was tired but triumphant. "We did this because we had to, because submission was never an option, because some things are worth dying for." The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Galactic Council had ceased to exist. Of the 4,000 ships that had defended the Nexus, over 3,000 were destroyed or captured. The station itself was a burning wreck. The 17 species that had ruled the galaxy were scattered, their power broken. Humanity had lost 63 ships. Over 18,000 soldiers had died. The cost was terrible. But they had won. 5 years later, Ambassador Shin stood before a different assembly. The coalition of free worlds met in a new station, built from the wreckage of the old Nexus. 32 species had joined, united not by fear but by choice. Admiral Park had finally retired to a small house on the coast of Korea. He spent his days fishing and watching the waves. Sometimes, late at night, he would look up at the stars and remember the battles, the losses, the victories. He had done his duty. Now it was time to rest. Captain commanded the first coalition fleet. She trained pilots from a dozen species, teaching them the human way of war. She never forgot the friends she had lost, but she honored them by building something worth their sacrifice. Dr. Han led the cultural exchange, working to replace centuries of hatred with understanding. It was slow work, but she believed in it. And on a small moon orbiting a distant star, a monument had been built. Names were carved in stone, thousands of them from every species that had fought for freedom. Human names stood beside names, former enemies who had chosen a different path. At the center of the monument, a simple inscription was written in every known language. They demanded we kneel, we chose to stand, we will not yield. President, older now but still sharp, visited the monument every year on the anniversary of the final battle. She would stand there for hours, reading the names, remembering the cost. One year, a young girl approached her. The girl was, her blue skin marked with the scars of the labor camps where she had been born. "Were you afraid," the girl asked, "when you decided to fight?" Looked down at her with gentle eyes. "Yes, I was terrified, we all were." "Then why did you fight?" Knelt down so she could look the girl in the eyes. "Because some things matter more than fear. Freedom matters, dignity matters, the right to choose your own path matters." She smiled softly. "And because we believed that we were not alone, that if we stood up first, others would stand with us." The girl nodded slowly, understanding. Then she reached out and touched one of the names on the monument, a human name, a soldier who had died freeing her world. "Thank you," she whispered. Stood and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, her people were still fighting, still building, still reaching for the future. They had won their freedom. Now they had to be worthy of it. The story of humanity's stand against the Galactic Council spread across the galaxy, carried by traders and travelers and refugees. It became a legend, a myth, a promise. If they could do it, anyone could. And that was the greatest victory of all.